Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the McCune Charitable Foundation. And the Nieper Natural History Programming Fund for KNME-TV. And viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, lawmakers are back inside the Roundhouse. The progress made on the state's redistricting efforts.
They've been here for a long time and they're not going to go anywhere. And so I think the key is really sort of learning about them.
Plus, uncovering our hidden urban wildlife and learning how to live more in harmony with those populations. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm your host, Gene Grant. We're tracking breaking developments in the potential merger between PNM and East Coast power company Avangrid. We'll explain why New Mexico's Public Regulation Commission went further than expected, striking down the proposed merger completely. Our line opinion panel reacts to that decision and the governor's proposal to give educators a sizable pay bump within the next year. Legislators will have a say on that, but not before they tackle redrawing political district lines across the state. Let's get right to the line. We have some good perspective this week on what's happening in Santa Fe. We're joined by two former state senators, Republican Diane Snyder and Democrat Eric Griego. Thank you both for being here. We're also welcoming back friend of the show, Tom Garrity of the Garrity Group Public Relations Company. We're always glad when Tom's here. All right, guys, the action's coming slow and deliberate in the Roundhouse. Lawmakers are planning for up to 12 days of work to hash out these redistricting decisions. And Tom, so far, what do you make of the approach?
Well, unfortunately, it's kind of what we thought might happen. By disclosure, on the topic of redistricting, I do have some clients in that particular space. My views are my own. Mm-hmm. With respect to what's happening is that I think what we saw was that the Citizen Redistricting Committee made their suggestions after two statewide hearings. They developed a set of maps for each of the different categories and submitted those maps. And I think the legislature just said, you know what? I think we could probably improve upon these, at which point it just really kind of took out the whole, people over place or rather over, politics is really kind of taking over. Mm-hmm. And that's really unfortunate because I think that, there definitely isn't any substantive public input on these different maps or even on this process. And I'm concerned that, unfortunately, partisan gerrymandering is going to become the rule of the day.
Let's go to our politicians on that one. Nice setup there, Mr. Tom. Eric Griego, former Senator Eric Griego, as Tom mentions, lawmakers are showing no fear and just turning away from what the CRC came up with. And we don't know exactly, they're arguing today as we record this, so we don't have the latest. But your sense of it so far, what you've seen, are the maps that Justice Chavez and others handed in just toast at this point?
Well, to be fair, I don't think they're starting from scratch. I think the recommended maps in most cases, as far as I've seen, have been the basis, the point of departure. And It's absolutely true that they've been tweaked, some more than others. So I wasn't crazy about all the maps, but certainly there
all the maps that came out of the CRC were the
it came out of the CRC, yeah. And I mean, I supported this idea of having an independent body do it. I think they did a reasonable job of trying to take a lot of public input. I think the maps that came up with were, for the most part, pretty fair. And we don't know because they're literally, as you said, voting on them as we speak. So we don't know. And I was just talking to a former colleague before the show and like they don't know. There was amendments being offered and so on. So I went through this 10 years ago when I was in the Senate. I think Senator Snyder might have been there too. But there's changes up until the end. And just to be clear for the viewers, like these are, no matter how these things come out, they're going to be challenged legally. That's what happened last time. Mm-hmm. The courts will ultimately decide if they were fair, if there was anything untoward. But I know we're going to talk about this, but the biggest change I think that's really caused a bit of a dust up is this idea that we should have really redraw the congressional maps. And I think that's where everybody's focused. But there's a lot of other stuff going on, especially in the state Senate where Diane and I served. I think there's going to be some pretty big changes to the districts in the Senate side as well. In the state Senate, the House is less going on there. But I think the big change that perhaps folks are not happy with is that there will be 3 Democratic-leaning districts as opposed to 2 Democratic and 1 Republican. And no matter where you come out on that, I think that's something that's happening all across the country, given the stakes. I think if the Republicans were in control, you can be assured that they would be redrawing these districts the same way. So ultimately, I think the court's going to decide whether or not to accept what comes out of the legislature when they're done this week or next week.
Senator Snyder, I want to get to this point of Democrat versus Republican, but just bear with me a quick sec, because one of the big issues already has been around one of the CRC maps, which was originally submitted by the Center for Civic Policy. The map would shift our national congressional maps drastically, as Eric mentioned, with a goal of reportedly, and we all get this, enhancing Hispanic and Latino voices and others. That may sound good on the surface, but those decisions are all trade-offs, aren't they?
Every decision in redistricting is a trade-off. Just one quick up-to-date. I was there for the 2001 redistricting.
Right.
And you have to understand, we convened on Monday, and on Tuesday morning, 9/11 happened.
Oh.
So we had a totally different atmosphere in the Senate, in the legislature, to go through redistricting. Didn't mean we didn't get over it and got a little bit nasty along the way. The biggest difference, I think right now, is that this is the first time in 30 years or so that we've had the last two redistrictings where the executive and both chambers are controlled by one party. Always before, we had a governor that vetoed it, and then of course the two plans went to the courts. I think we will end up in court. I'm not sure exactly the judicial reason for us going, but I do think that's the only way that the public will accept it. I think that I can't help but think and look at this. I too supported the idea of an independent party, but I don't think it was an independent group of people. But that's my personal opinion. Could others hold that? I think that even Senator Cervantes' bill, which in the Senate's been introduced, and he and Representative have introduced, goes along the lines of dividing up Albuquerque into 3 districts. I'm sorry, I don't see the areas of commonality. I can't see that Hobbs has anything in common with Santa Fe, or Albuquerque with Roswell, or any of those, or say Las Cruces with Farmington. They're just not it. And I believe in having equitable. And I think that there, in several of the plans, there were efforts made with particularly Native Americans to make sure that they're represented, and in the House and in the Senate as well. And I think that's the area where we've been most negligent over the years.
Let me swing Tom in here, Senator, just a quick sec. Sure. I want to touch on this idea you just mentioned about splitting Albuquerque up. I mean, Tom, the idea that Roswell and Carrizozo would be included with a section of Albuquerque, or that a section of Albuquerque that would be deemed more rural somehow should be mashed in with another district. Is there a downside to the urban center if this in fact happens?
Oh, most definitely, because the reason, or you would have to assume that one of the reasons why that particular map is being proposed is because they know that Albuquerque will be able to sway, the election one way or another for the Eastern District, and it's the one that we're discussing right now does not pass muster with respect to competitiveness or partisanship. And so what that means is that basically we would have 3 districts that are truly only leaning to one side, at least according to the partisan, the Princeton gerrymandering project. So I think that it's that's the only reason why somebody would want to split up Albuquerque 3 ways. My guess is that Senator or Representative Stansberry would probably not be in favor of having her district cut up to benefit the 3rd congressional or the 2nd congressional.
Right.
So there's a whole lot of trading going on, but it could be really simple if we just went back to concept A that was presented by Justice Chavez and the CRC.
Eric, please do pick up on that, and I got a follow-up for you, but again, we got about a minute 20 here.
Yeah, just quickly on that. I mean, there's always this in the legislature and in New Mexico, always this discussion of the rural-urban divide. And
Right.
I think if this is really about unity, I mean, I will personally be affected because I'll be pushed out of this urban district into a southern district under this particular map. But I have to say, we're always in the legislature, and you've seen this, there's always this split. Everybody loves beating up on Albuquerque and the rural communities. I think all three members should have some rural communities, some small communities, but they also should have a piece of Albuquerque. And whether they're Republicans or Democrats. Look, Heather Wilson was my congressperson for many, many years, as was Steve Schiff. So, it shouldn't always be that Albuquerque, the greater Albuquerque area, is its own island as the biggest, city in the state. I think it's actually a very reasonable principle to say, let's make everybody have a stake in rural New Mexico and in the most urban area.
Eric, it may be reasonable, but is it practical? I mean, is it really? I mean, we're a huge state. We're a massively huge state. Is it really practical to have someone many, many miles away from the center of Albuquerque and they can connect somehow? I can't see it.
Look at the current districts. You have massive districts that go from the Four Corners area to basically southern area. So literally 200 to 300 mile district, but they happen to be two of the districts, and only one is very compact. So essentially, we've divided the fifth largest state by landmass into two massive, very spread out districts and packed Albuquerque into one. So again, even by that principle, Gene, you would think we'd want to let's find a way, whether it's this map or another way, to have everybody have a stake in rural and urban New Mexico.
Good
right?
points there.
I mean, that's
Good points there. Hey, we'll be keeping a close eye on that special session, so stick with us on social media for updates and, of course, more analysis next week right here on New Mexico in Focus. Journalist and author Sam Quinones has been on the cutting edge in recent years, covering the evolving drug trade and the increasingly deadly drug epidemic here in the United States. This week, he sat down with correspondent Laura Paskus to talk about his latest book, The Least of Us: True Tales of America and Hope in the Time of Fentanyl and Meth. It's a hard topic, but one increasingly relevant to New Mexico families and communities.
Thanks for coming back on the show, Sam.
It's great to be here, Laura. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So I'd like to start by asking you to read a paragraph at the beginning of your book. I felt like I knew this was going to be a tough book to read, and I feel like this particular paragraph on page 9 gave me the hope that I could get through this book, and I think it'll help our audience as well.
Sure. Okay. Happy to. I came to see that addicts gripped by drug-induced self-centeredness and isolation are just extreme examples of each of us in our time. Once freed, they discover what we all need. They discover grace, patience with others, a feeling of being part of something bigger than themselves, optimism and gratitude, a recognition of themselves in others. If we're lucky, we'll come out on the other side of all that besets us as Americans, as I write, with the insight that recovering addicts receive, and with wisdom enough to glimpse ourselves in them. If so, we'll be better for it.
Thank you, Sam. So I feel like in The Least of Us, there's kind of 4 classes of drugs that you're writing about. Heroin, these pharmaceutical opioids, fentanyl, and this new meth, P2P.
Right.
Can you kind of give us like the 101 on what these 4?
Yes. And I think that's very important because what we are seeing now, what we have been in the middle of for the last several years, is the transition of the trafficking world in Mexico away from the standard drugs that they've often been associated with, heroin, poppies, growing poppies and so on, and marijuana, and towards synthetic drugs in predominantly. And the synthetic drugs have never seen a plant. They're just chemically made in labs. And this has happened not because of necessarily any demand in the United States for this stuff. This happens entirely because it benefits traffickers. They no longer need land or rainfall or sunlight. They no longer need a large farming, harvesting crew. They no longer need seasons. They can just, if all they really need now is ports, shipping ports, because through shipping ports, they get all the chemicals from the world markets, primarily China, but also other countries as well, not exclusive to any one country, that they would need to produce these drugs if they can control those ports. And in Mexico, given their enormous power and their ability and their guns that they get, frankly, from us, they are able to control that. And so those chemicals have been coming in unrelenting container loads for many years, and this has allowed them to transition, and more people get into the production of these drugs. And so what we have now is not only do we have this shift away from plant-based drugs, but the supplies are just staggering, just breathtaking amounts, so much so that they have been able to really, in essence, cover the entire United States with these drugs, which is an unprecedented achievement in the underworld. We've never had one source cover the entire country with one drug, let alone two, and yet that's kind of what we're finding here.
And so what I feel like lots of people in our audience, have heard about opioids and know what heroin is, but what is fentanyl and what is
fentanyl? Is a synthetic opioid. It hits the same receptors in our brains. It's a marvelous drug used medically. In surgery, it has revolutionized surgery, and I bet many of your listeners have been given fentanyl in the surgical setting. That's one setting. When it's in the hands of the underworld, it becomes an extraordinarily dangerous drug because it's so much more potent than morphine and heroin and all these other opioids that we're used to hearing more about. And so, but because it's made in such staggering quantities, and because you don't need very much, it's so potent that a small amount will make you a lot of money. You're finding now that the dealing world, particularly dealers closer to the street, have been using it to sprinkle into, for lack of a better term, mix into other drugs. So you find it now frequently in cocaine. You find it in methamphetamine. There are rare occasions, although I think it does happen, when you find it in marijuana. And so it's transformed. They say on the street, fentanyl changes everything. Yes, it's totally transformed drug use, who gets wealthy. It's made, because it's so widespread, almost anybody can be selling what used to be considered, kingpin type quantities of this stuff. Right. And that means that a lot of that just adds to the distribution. More and more people distributing it means it gets to more and more places.
Mm-hmm. So you write in your book, your latest book, the days of recreational drug use are over in America. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is just what I was referring to, that you cannot take, it used to be, I grew up in a time when it was commonplace for people at parties, a line of cocaine, oh sure, that's no problem. A pill, okay, fine, no problem. Well, those days I don't believe are over. I don't believe exist anymore. That you cannot trust any drug out there right now that you did not buy from a pharmacy in a pharmaceutical bottle. That's it. You can't, even your best friend giving you a pill, it has to be. You have to suspect it. The other part of this issue, because it's so made in such quantities, the Mexican trafficking world has taken to packaging fentanyl now in the form of counterfeit, phony brand name pills, like that look like Percocet or Xanax or oxycodone generic 30 milligram blue pills are very, very common. That's really the pill that started it all. They figure out, hey, we could just press these, put fentanyl into them. All those pills contain is fentanyl. And many of them now are being reported to contain significant amounts of fentanyl that would kill a person who's never used before, a user who has never done it before. And that's what you're finding. Fentanyl, because it's so common, because it's been now sprinkled, mixed into other drugs, which we had also never seen in our country's history. The death toll is what we've seen it is, which is 100,000 deaths just reported last couple of weeks in a 12-month period. I think we're going to see those 12-month periods continually be at or near 100,000 deaths for those for a while now.
You really, kind of get at this in your book in multiple places that hit me as a parent, that kids today don't get to make a mistake with drugs.
No.
There aren't second chances. Can you talk about that?
Yes, it's a very unforgiving world. And that's because drugs now are very cheap, very prevalent. They're everywhere. As I say, they covered the entire country. And extraordinarily potent in ways that we never knew. The drugs before, even when the Colombians were moving huge amounts of cocaine into the United States in the 80s, the cocaine was very expensive. It was usually very cut and diluted. And we've never had a period like we have today on the streets where the drugs are so deadly, so prevalent, and so cheap. And again, we've had a long history of alarmist, sensationalized reporting on drugs going back to the 30s. And I'm not wanting to be part of that history, that tradition, but this is different. This is very, very different. What has happened, I think it's fascinating, all the mythology that might have been created in the 30s, through the 50s, into the 70s, and whatever, about the drugs on the street, that, one hit will kill you, and that kind would turn you into a raving maniac. All those myths are now reality. And the data is very, very clear. This is not mythology. This is not sensationalism. This is fact.
I'd like to touch on COVID a little bit and the rise of overdose deaths, which we've all been hearing about. And it's complex, you write, but you add that you suspect that 2021 is part of a long, unplanned experiment in decriminalization of one of the most devastating street drugs we've ever known, and that those addicted to them are remaining on the streets. Can you talk about this a little?
Well, I think this is a big problem, that our thinking on what to do about drug addiction and the balance between law enforcement and treatment and prevention and all that has been formed in another era of drugs. The drugs have changed, our thinking hasn't. So the idea is that we should decriminalize these small quantities of drugs and small low-level felonies and whatever that have to do with drugs and that kind of thing. And I think in another era that might have worked, but to the extent that that leads people to be on the street longer and not be in jail, that is not compassion. That is the opposite. Those people will die. There's no such thing as a long-term street fentanyl user. They all die. Nobody. That's what's fueling our amazing numbers every month and every year now. And the idea of no bail, well, it's a very just thing when applied to certain cases. I believe that too. I've been a crime reporter a long time. However, when you arrest somebody for a drug case, a minor drug case that is really a symptom of a big, very deep drug problem, particularly considering all the drugs on the street, you take that person to jail, that person gets kicked right back out because there's no bail applied, and that person is right back in that same world that is devastating and life-threatening at every moment. Really. And so to me, these drugs are calling on us to question a whole lot. It's calling on us to question, for example, how we run jail. I think right now we need to understand that jail has been an anchor around our neck, the way it's traditionally been run for decades. It is a horrible, horrible problem. You go in criminally minded, mentally ill, or addicted, you come out worse. Right? It really creates problems for us rather than solutions. But in some parts of the country, they're rethinking that. So in the book, The Least of Us, they got 3 chapters on a very red county changing the way they do jail because they realize it's not working. And so people use jail. There's pods where you enter, you sign up, it's all about recovery. You're making your bed at 8 in the morning. You're no TV. You're not watching Judge Judy playing poker. You are working on your recovery. It's not a panacea. There is no panacea here, but it is a way of saying we're rethinking how all these things that we have to do and taking small steps, all of which together may amount to a really significant dent in this problem, not a 100% solution.
Well, thank you. Everyone should read this book. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. Very kind of you.
Thanks.
State Public Regulation Commissioners have struck down the potential merger between PNM and East Coast utility provider Avangrid. Those commissioners were expected to vote on whether or not to hear oral arguments in the merger case, but they went a step further We'll get to all the reasons why, but broadly, PRC Chairman Stephen Fishman said two companies have, quote, a demonstrated record of bad behavior, end quote. That includes billing errors in the Northeast years ago. And Senator Griego, was this doomed from the start given that history? I mean, these quotes from these PRC folks are really, really hard.
I don't think it was doomed from the start because I actually thought they had a ton of momentum. It became, unfortunately, very transactional. I mean, I think both Avangrid and Iberdrola were sort of just trying to heap round after round of additional concessions to the 23, 24 groups involved. And they got 23 of the 24 to stand down or at least support it. But the one group that stayed in there, New Energy Economy, basically the most knowledgeable, but also relentless in just making sure that we made the right choice. And I think that the more information that came out about both companies, the more questionable it became. I was frankly shocked it was a unanimous vote to reject the merger. I thought it was going to be a 2 or a 4-1 because that's the way it was coming down. So I actually think as time went on, Gene, it got worse for the companies. And I don't think it was just around service or some of the press around the controversies with Iberdrola in Spain. It was also this idea of who's really going to benefit, right? And I think if you're a PNM, anybody on the call or listening, if you're a PNM shareholder, it was great for you because they got a premium for the shareholders. If you happen to be related to anybody or part of the PNM management, it was also a boon for them. But for ratepayers and for people who really want to develop really community-based, or whether it's community solar or municipalities being able to have more control over their energy use and consumption, and it was not great for them because this was really essentially consolidated on steroids, a big, not just national, but multinational company using this particular deal to broaden the model of a really powerful privately owned, not shareholder owned necessarily, company. So anyway, so I think personally, I think it's an opportunity for us to take a different look at what we want to do. If we want a renewable economy, is there another way to get there? And with all the money we're going to be talking about on this show and in the future, could we invest some of that in building our own local community-based capacity to really transition to this sustainable, post fossil fuel economy? And I think it's possible because 10% of the energy in this country is community-based power companies. It's not investor-owned, and it's not the current model that we're so used to at PNM.
You make a great point, Senator, a very great point. We're almost arguing in a 1990s or 2000 kind of way, and energy is going in a whole other direction here. Tom, other concerns about Avangrid expressed by the PRC examiner included poor customer service, Eric mentioned, increased rates, $60 million in fines issued by state regulators in New England, particularly Maine. Pretty serious concerns. In Cynthia Hall, one of the regulators, she had a quote, "There are a lot of risks that are hard to fully quantify, but there are strong red flags flying in our face," end quote. That's tough stuff.
Yeah, it is. I think Senator Griego raised a number of solid points as far as, if Avangrid and PNM decide to take another bite of the apple, so to speak, things that they should consider. I think that's going to be pretty difficult, seeing that it was, a unanimous no. I mean, that was really surprising to me. I think one of the areas where I think there was a misstep was in the messaging. Because there was a lot of talk about 65 million in rate credits, 15 million to low income for low income energy, 2 million to help improve access to electricity. Well, those are all big numbers, and when you consider that half of the state of New Mexico, that half of the residents are on receive some kind of federal aid, that messaging, that you just can't comprehend all that money and what that benefit's going to be. So I think that there was a misstep in messaging of really making that connection with New Mexico consumers, although their target audience was clearly based on all of the full page ads, all the letters to the editor. It was to rally business to help influence and get the PRC to come alongside and say, yes, this is a good deal. And so I think that was a strategic misstep. was really kind of creating that messaging that brought in all New Mexico residents. Instead, you just had dollar signs that a lot of people in the state just, like going, yeah, that's a lot of money. I'm never going to see any of it, or really understand how it would be applied.
That's a fair point, I have to say. Good stuff there, Tom. Senator Snyder, Attorney General Hector Balderas had been a vocal figure supporting the merits of this merger, as you know. That's despite him facing ethical questions about his involvement with certain players in the deal. And as you know, he was clear of those ethics complaints. But how does it sit for you, for him to be so out front and center on this issue?
In many ways, I think he's doing his job. Had there not been the prior consideration about his friend being their attorney, that is what the Attorney General is supposed to be doing in some areas of his responsibilities. So I think that is true. I can't imagine A.G. Balderas hiding behind his light behind a bush. I think he's smart, he's talented, and felt compelled to make his statement about what he thought was best for the citizens of New Mexico. So in that sense, to me, it was just him doing his job, and maybe his personal feeling got in a little bit. But the thing I find most interesting is how, and I don't think it was just the dollars or the increased benefit package or concessions, is all the groups except New Energy Economy, who had been opposing this merger, suddenly were supporting it. What happened? What do they know that was not presented? I didn't see any articles about that, really. I just don't know why. But it says to me there was something besides the money that was part of their consideration. I do agree with Tom, everything was geared, unfortunately, in the advertising and information toward the business community. Well, that rubbed some people, citizens in our state, the wrong way.
That's right.
I didn't feel like PNM and Avangard really spoke to the people. They just, if you're telling me that the Chamber of Commerce and so-and-so CEO and da-da-da-da-da, well, I know all those people, and yeah, they're wonderful. They're going to look for the business deal. But I don't feel like the message was good and out to the people. The other thing...
I'm going to have to agree with you, Senator, that, you think about the TV campaign with the people holding up the signs. It was pretty weak tea when it really comes to trying to move hearts and minds. Let me go to Senator Griego here real quick, if I could. I'll come back to you, Senator Snyder. We made changes to the PRC several years ago to try and up the professional expertise of commissioners. As you know, you were part of those discussions right here at this table years ago. Tough question. Did those changes pay off in this situation, given the outcome?
I always thought it was a red herring. Look, the folks, Steve, I served with Steve Fishman. He was a former CEO. He's a guy who was a CEO of a pretty good sized corporation. Joe Maestas, Commissioner Maestas, is one of the smartest people in public. He's an engineer, compared a lot to Martin Heinrich, who has a solid sort of technical credentials. So I think they're pretty knowledgeable. Not all of them are, experts in energy policy, certainly. I'm more concerned, Gene, with looking forward, this decision to really, that the industry, including PNM, to sort of make the PRC non-elected. We talked about that on a previous show. And I think it may play out. One scenario is if the Supreme Court doesn't approve this, that they may actually wait, and the amount of time it may take to get through the courts, that this new commission, which will be appointed by whoever the governor, either Governor Lehan Grisham, or if there's a new governor, will get to appoint these folks. And regardless of who wins, I think they're likely to be much more pro-merger. I think that's one of the things that Avangrid and Iberdrola and PNM are sort of betting on. That's one scenario that could play out. I think having commissioners who are elected by the citizens, who absolutely should have some minimal qualifications, but I don't think whether Democrat or Republican should be appointing folks who then will make, this is going to be the first huge decision that this non-elected PRC could make. And it could very much go against, I think, public opinion on it. I haven't seen a lot of polling, but my understanding is most folks, to the earlier point, is like, they don't understand it, but to the extent that this is a big kind of multilateral or multinational deal.
That's right.
and PNM's not incredibly popular with the general public.
That's right. And when you think about it, guys, a $4.3 billion all cash deal does not come along that often in this world. Thank you for your thoughts on this topic. We're out of time. We've been following this for months now. We're going to continue to do so. We're back in a few minutes to talk about the governor's plan to attract and retain our teachers.
It's really, really common not to know that we have coyotes or foxes in Nob Hill because you don't see them, and that's largely because they don't really want too much to do with us most of the time. So which is a good thing probably for us and for them.
While the legislature has its hands full with redistricting during the ongoing special session, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham is looking ahead to next year. On the first of the month, the governor released a proposal to give public educators around the state a 7% pay bump. The governor's office says New Mexico teachers deserve better compensation, and the state is also trying to fill a large number of vacancies left through the pandemic, as you know. And Senator Snyder, is it about money? Is that enough to draw more teachers back into the workforce, or is it something else?
Well, I think it's more than that, but I certainly think that is a consideration that teachers look at when they're coming into our state. Or young people, we lose so many to out of state. Maybe our young teachers are going to our neighbors because they all at this moment have higher salaries, beginning salaries. But it's not, to me, it's not the only issue. I'm sorry, we have had some of the worst leaders for the state education department, the worst leaders in Albuquerque public schools. And understand, this is all my opinion. But I look at it and I watch it closely and I'm going, why would you want to be a teacher? It sometimes impacting young people's lives gets old when and I also think, and this will probably get you calls about me, is I think that our teachers unions have a greater control for our legislature than they deserve. And I think it would be very interesting, and I mentioned this to you earlier, is if we could get a panel of recently retired teachers that couldn't be penalized for anything they say, and just get the real story. It's kind of the way I feel about it, because I feel like everybody we hear from has got a vested interest of some kind about what they're saying.
Yeah, that's a good point there, Tom. You know, teachers have had to endure a whole lot through the pandemic, learning, teaching remotely, risking infection. I got to ask, is this just an obvious move for the governor, given the budget surplus? Shouldn't, teachers get a little something out of this? I mean, they just slogged through an amazing 18 months.
Yeah. I mean, it's good on a couple of levels. And personally, I'm really glad to see this. On one level, yes, I think you need to provide an incentive to have teachers remain engaged during this COVID timeframe. But two, I mean, when you think about it, the last time that teacher pay was actually addressed, it was Senate Bill 212, and I had dark hair. So, it was a long time ago, and it set up a 3-tier system, but really that 3-tier system has just been ignored for, decades. And so, I am thrilled personally for teachers and the teaching profession. I don't necessarily agree with everything Senator Snyder said about leadership, but, when it comes to supporting teachers in the classroom, I think that's what we're all in favor of. And I think that's what Governor Lujan Grisham actually accomplishes with this kind of proposal out of the PED.
Eric, that range Tom mentioned about those 3 tiers, we're about 40 to 60,000 based on experience, and a 7% increase would only affect teachers who didn't already receive a bump from the tier increases. So it's really not an across the board kind of thing, but the chairman of the Senate Budget Writing Committee, Democrat George Munoz, says this shouldn't be a problem for lawmakers in the 2022 session, saying we have the money. Is he right?
I didn't agree with Senator Munoz on very many things, but I got to say that, if you're going to put money, surplus money anywhere, it ought to be in human, I always say this on this show, human capital, investing in our kids. And I really do think that's what teachers are. I mean, they're working folks like everybody else, and most of them, and I'm biased, I happen to be married to an educator who was formerly an APS and now works for the state, but they do it because that's their chosen profession, right? So they're going to do it regardless of the money. But it shouldn't be a vow of poverty to be a teacher, especially a new teacher.
That's right.
And one of the things that came out in the press around this is how much our teaching population is aging, right? There just isn't this new sort of cohort of younger teachers. It's smaller and smaller. So if you want to have, you want to get people in college thinking about this, rather than saying, well, I love teaching, and I'm willing to work for $30,000 or $35,000 a year, or $40,000 now, that there's a possibility that I could actually support a family, especially, especially if you're, two teacher families. I have friends who are two teacher families, and how they make it in this economy is just, I'm always shocked and super respectful of my friends who are, there's a lot of couples who are in teaching, right? They met in education and they're passionate about teaching.
That's right.
But they have to figure out how to get by on, $80,000 a year in a city like Santa Fe.
Right.
That's very, very hard,
Good point.
Even here in Albuquerque. So I think it's great. I agree with Tom. I think if you're going to put your money anywhere, this is the place to put it. And I hope that it will yield some real results as we look back, if it does happen in a few years, that we really start seeing some, smaller class sizes and the things that we all want to see,
Senator Snyder, I got a note from a friend that's a principal here in APS, and she made a good point. She said, there's going to be principals upside down here very quickly, meaning principals are not getting, teachers are actually sneaking up and principals are sort of staying the same. And other state employees are due for a raise as well, as we know. I mean, should those other employees get a bump as well at the same exact time, or should we just kind of chop at this one aspect at a time?
No, I think if we're going to do something with all this kind of money, I go along with Senator Griego. It should be in human resources, with one caveat.
Okay.
We've got to have capital projects. We've got to have roads, but don't forget, our school buildings are falling apart too in many places.
Right. That's right.
When I was in the Senate, I had several schools, but I had two middle schools, and one of them every year would bring me in December and present a bill to me. And so and then they'd come to Santa Fe to visit. And I asked them one year, what, if you could have anything, what would you want? And I said, not pizza every day for lunch. And they said, we'd like to be able to wash our hands in our room. They were in the portable buildings. So I said, you find out what it will cost. You get the real numbers, and I will give you that money in capital outlay. Well, I did. Well, guess what? I got bombarded by APS lobbyists and leaders saying you can't do that. Well, first of all, I looked at them and said, you got to be kidding. I can do. Anyway, we got these are little kids. They need to wash their hands. So we have a lot of portable buildings, and that's just one example of capital.
Let me sneak Tom in here. We're just a little tight on time.
Yeah.
I appreciate that anecdote because that does make the point. And Tom, besides a pay increase, what other incentives can the state or even a local district provide to help recruit qualified teachers? What's out there to offset staffing losses?
Well, there's a variety of different things that districts could provide. A lot of it goes to community partnerships. I would just briefly like to kind of touch on the unintended consequence of increasing pay, which is definitely due. And that unintended consequence is that you're seeing the potential of government jobs seeing a huge increase in salary, which is great. But the unintended consequence is the impact it has on the workforce and for the private sector to try and be competitive. In the past, it was just the opposite, right? But now there you have that potential that the government jobs could be really kind of outpacing or outpricing some of those in the private sector. I just think that there needs to be a balance, and I hope
do we have that situation now, Tom? Because all the information I'm seeing is that teachers are going to the private side government people are going to the private side now because they can't get a competitive salary in government.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's I think research will support whichever argument you want to make.
Gotcha.
I'm just saying that right now, government is seeing the most influx of cash than the private sector. And maybe there's some catch up there, but I think it's just something to keep an eye out on. And that, we have to make sure that, there's an equal balance between government and private sector, that one doesn't get too far ahead of the other.
Good points there. Thanks again to our line panel. As always, this week, be sure to let us know what you think about any of the topics these guys covered on our Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram pages.
I'm Laura Paskus. On this month's Our Land, we talk about the creatures we inhabit our cities with. I spoke with University of New Mexico graduate student Zoe Rossman. She's an urban wildlife ecologist, and she shares some of her research. We talk about who's living here and why they matter. And we're really happy that in this show we feature video and images from around New Mexico shared by our friends and viewers. Welcome, Zoe. You're a graduate student in the biology department at UNM.
Yes, I am.
And
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining me. So you study carnivores or urban wildlife. Tell me a little bit about what your research is about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm an urban wildlife ecologist. So a lot of my previous work was actually up in Chicago, but lately I've moved back to focus on Albuquerque. And basically my research is about how and why the urban mammals that we see in our city are existing here and doing so well here. You know, and we know that there's a lot of urban wildlife all across the city, which I'm sure we'll get into. But we don't really have many answers about where those animals are actually occurring or why they are where they are.
As humans, I feel like we often think of ourselves as separate from nature, like I live here, you animals live over there. But Albuquerque, which is crazy because we're the largest city in New Mexico, there is wildlife all over the place. And like, for instance, I was super surprised to hear that there are foxes in Nob Hill.
Oh yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what's out there and what you hear from people is out there?
Yeah, of course. And first, I think that's an excellent point because the idea that cities are separate from nature and that only animals that we've, you know, brought in or cultivated are allowed to be here or should be here is just so bizarre because there's been urban wildlife for as long as there's been urban, you know, for as long as there have been cities. And, you know, we had urban animals in, you know, Aztec cities and in Chaco Canyon like 1,000 years ago, right? And so this is not new by any means to this area. But as far as what's here, you know, yeah, there's foxes in Nob Hill. I know you mentioned that to me. I had a friend a few months back who saw one in Nob Hill also. I ran into a woman whose friend had a family of gray foxes on their Ring camera on like Eubank and Wantabo. Definitely foxes, coyotes, raccoons and skunks, which you might expect. You know, you hear about those kind of animals, you know, in cities a lot. In the bosque, we've got porcupines and beavers and muskrat and all sorts of other little critters. Let's see, mountain lions and bears occasionally will come into the city, although they obviously don't live here all the time. There's not really enough habitat to support them. And you do occasionally get like the rarer animals like a ringtail being sighted. Bobcats are pretty common. So we've got the whole spectrum. We've also, I know you're one of the lucky few people that's seen javelina in Albuquerque, which is really exciting because their range is moving north. So, I mean, I've only ever seen them south of Albuquerque, but lately I think there have been 3 or 4 sightings in town, which will be really interesting to see if that continues and how that impacts things. But we have the whole spectrum, and I'm a mammalogist, so of course I'm like focusing on these medium to large size urban mammals, but of course we've got tons of birds and reptiles and amphibians and insects all throughout the city too.
So what is their presence? Like, for example, the foxes or coyotes or bobcats, what does their presence in the city say about us? And maybe what does it say about them?
That's a great question. So yes, not all animals do well in cities. And there are plenty of animals that have been harmed by urbanization, particularly large carnivores, species like wolves and bears and mountain lions even, although we do have, there are mountain lions living right in the LA suburbs. But there are plenty of species that could never live full-time in a city. And I think that's part of what draws me so much to the animals who can, because it's really cool that there are functioning animal communities all around us. So as to what it says about them, there are characteristics that make certain urban animals successful. So for mammals, it's things like having a really general diet. If you're a coyote, if you're a wolf, you have to eat meat, right? You can't go around just, eating whatever you want. If you're a coyote, you can eat rodents, but you can also eat berries or cat food or people's trash. I mean, right now, all the coyote scat I see is just full of prickly pear fruit, just like chock full of prickly pear. I'm like, that thing. But yeah, so there are things like being flexible, being able to shift your activity patterns. So coyotes if you go down to Bosque del Apache or up to Valles Caldera, you can see coyotes out in the middle of the day. And that doesn't really happen in cities. And so there are sort of different characteristics that make these urban mammals successful. In terms of what it says about us, it's hard to say because you find urban mammals in cities all around the world. They're in the biggest metropolitan areas in the US and down to smaller cities. Obviously, I think it's really cool that we have these urban mammals here in Albuquerque, but it's not a surprise because they've been here for a long time and they're not going to go anywhere. And so I think the key is really sort of learning about them because not all people know. I mean, it's really, really common not to know that we have coyotes or foxes in Nob Hill because you don't see them, and that's largely because they don't really want too much to do with us most of the time. So which is a good thing probably for us and for them. But I think it's cool that we do have them.
So one of the things, like in my neighborhood, I see coyotes, and my dog got sprayed by a skunk in the backyard, so clearly we have skunks.
Yeah.
I've seen raccoons like peeking out of the drainage gutters on the side of the road. And I'm always I always want to find them. Like, where do they sleep? Where do they make their homes?
Yeah, so it really depends on the animal, right? So if you take a porcupine, for instance, which I can see, you can see pretty commonly if you're walking in the bosque and looking up, especially now that the cottonwoods are starting to lose their leaves. But an animal like a porcupine, it needs that habitat, right? They sleep in the cottonwoods during the day and they eat the vegetation that's in the bosque at night. But it might not do so well if you dropped it in the middle of Nob Hill, right? Whereas an animal like a coyote or a fox or a skunk or a raccoon, they can often either exist entirely in smaller areas of habitat or sort of piece that habitat together, whether it's through, drainage ditches or little pieces of undeveloped lots or, parks, things like that. So they kind of find their nooks and crannies during the daytime mostly. And then at night, you can be driving in Nob Hill and see a couple coyotes playing in the middle of the street. And they're like, what are you doing here? So it really depends on the animal for sure.
Yeah. Are there things that cities can do to make more habitat for particular wildlife or to reduce conflicts between humans and wildlife, whether that's, keeping your chicken coop more fortified or reducing the opportunities for drivers to hit wildlife?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, at the city level, there's a lot of research that's sort of this new field of wildlife inclusive design. So how, as cities are growing and expanding or maybe being redesigned to mitigate climate change threats, things like that, how can we make sure that we're factoring wildlife and their needs into our design? But a big part of that is understanding what they need. And some of it, you might think some of it, okay, well, adding green spaces, things like that. Well, what kind of green spaces, right? And what plants should be there? And should they be native plants or non-native plants? And for larger mammals, there's still a lot that we don't know about what makes them successful in cities. And that's, lucky for me because that's sort of what I'm using my research to try to find out. But I think, at the city level, trying to incorporate wildlife needs into future design is a big thing. Educating the community, I know that I think our city does a great job of that. If you go on, the Department of Environmental Health's wildlife page, they have almost every species that you can find in Albuquerque and what to do and what's normal and when to be concerned and things like that. So I think that that's really fantastic at a city level. As far as the individual level, definitely things like, making sure that your pets are supervised, making sure that The big one is not feeding animals, and that's such a tough one because nobody, I mean, at least I hope, like nobody's feeding a coyote because they're like, oh, I hate coyotes so much, like I'm gonna go out of my way to feed them, right? And I think a big part of that comes from this idea that cities and nature might be separate and that wildlife don't belong here. So if I see a coyote, it must need help. Like I better feed it because I like coyotes, I want them to be here, I should feed them. And in reality, it does a lot more harm than good because these animals are totally fine without our intervention. They're gonna find enough, no problem. But what feeding does is it habituates those animals to us in a negative way. And so, you know, although things like animal attacks, wild animal attacks on humans are like really, really rare, almost 100% of the time they're due to humans feeding wild animals.
So when you think about a city of the future, like Albuquerque of the future, like are there like bears walking through town? Like what's a good wildlife future for our city?
I think a good wildlife future in Albuquerque looks a lot to the wildlife that we have here right now. And I think, you know, one of the really fascinating things about urban ecology to me, and I'm absolutely on board with preserving natural habitat and, you know, trying to maintain the species that we have, ones that are threatened or endangered. But I think the really cool thing about urban ecology is you get to let some of that go and you get to focus on, like we've taken a piece of land, the land that Albuquerque sits on, and modified it beyond recognition. And there are still animals that moved in and said, yeah, hey, this is cool, this is home. Like I'm gonna start my family here, right? And I think that's amazing. And so I think urban wildlife communities, urban mammal communities are so interesting and dynamic. And I think, you know, again, as long as there are cities, there will be urban wildlife. And there are definitely things that we can do at multiple levels, you know, to encourage that. But the coyotes that I see in Albuquerque look pretty healthy. You know, the porcupines that I've seen in Albuquerque look pretty healthy. People's photos of foxes and bobcats and raccoons and skunks, you know, the animals that we have here are really special. And I think that if we can, you know, as we move forward into the future, you know, it'll be interesting to see how much of that is maintained and how much of that changes. But the animals that end up in cities are flexible and resilient. And so I think those communities are always going to be just really fascinating.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Zoe. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
That's all the time we have for this week. Thanks again for joining us and for staying informed and engaged. We'll see you again next week in Focus.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the McCune Charitable Foundation and the Nieper Natural History Programming Fund for KNME-TV. And viewers like you.